Hey everyone, Brian Johnson here, founder of Aerbits. Today I'm unpacking what I've learned since September of 2021. You'll want to stick around for this one. Government contracting. The US government is an expert at procurement. It's intimidating with a ton of process, but it's designed to get the public the best deal. It requires a lot of waiting and follow-up, but if you're patient, you can get through to a contract. Government contracting comes in many forms. My experience personally has been with learning about RFPs, RFQs, pilot programs, and sole sourcing. An RFP is a request for proposal. In an RFP, the government describes exactly what it's looking for. Potential vendors can bid on an RFP, letting the government know which capabilities the vendor has and how it will meet the specifications in the request for proposal. An RFQ is a request for quotation. This is where the government just wants to know the price of something. And a pilot program is a trial run before a full-scale implementation. I've learned the most about a pilot program. Typically, pilot programs have a smaller budget and they require less regulatory oversight. I found that the people you might work with in the government on a given contract are not the same people who are experts in the procurement process. Oftentimes, the person who wants your product will refer the process to another person within the government who is a specialist in procurement. What that means for you is you need to use your diplomatic skills to be courteous while asking for updates. Although the procurement process can be quite long, if you stick with it, and if there are customers within the government that really want what you're offering, you will make it through. Just be warned that there are a lot of things to learn, a lot of processes to go through, so just be prepared to be patient, courteous, kind, and do a lot of follow-up. Tech stuff is my favorite stuff. In this case, I have a lot of lessons. I've picked out a few that I want to share with you. 3 of the lessons I want to share with you are around AI. And the first lesson is around productionizing an AI model. At this point, I've productionized a dozen or more versions of my AI model. I will say that using a managed service is the easiest way to deploy a production model. In my case, I wasn't able to find an off-the-shelf model that did what I need to do, detecting dump sites from the air. So I had to create my own custom dataset and train my own custom model. In order to do that, I had to learn how to annotate a dataset. I attempted to use several third-party tools, including RoboFlow, Scale AI, among others, as well as several open-source tools like LabelMe. In the end, I found it most efficient and effective to create my own labeling tool. And that's because my needs are very simple at this point. I simply needed to annotate aerial images with dump sites and to save the annotations to a database where I could later export them into any format I want. I found that third-party tools tended to lock me into a certain way of doing things in order to benefit from a large array of features and functionality. And in the end, that required a lot more work from me than simply creating my own very simple annotation tool with open-source third-party annotation software. One of the softwares I'm using for annotations is called Annotorious, and it works quite well. In addition to using Annotorious, I'm also using something called Pan Zoom, which allows me to pan and zoom on a photo, and I can draw the annotations on the photo with Annotorious. Data annotation is a grind, but it's essential for quality AI. In fact, I think the dataset is one of the defensible moats when it comes to AI. Which brings me to another lesson. Another lesson in AI is that you have to be careful what outputs you share. For instance, if my model detects dump sites and draws bounding boxes around those dump sites, then I need to be careful about sharing certain aspects of that output. If I were to share the bounding box metadata as well as the source image, that would allow other vendors or other companies to recreate my data set. They could even collect their own data and use my model to annotate their data set, creating a competitive data set with my set. I believe that keeping some of these assets private is going to be one of the things that makes an AI company defensible. Because as an AI company operates in the real world, it's collecting more and more data, creating a better and better data set. And in areas where the data set is very unique and there is no open source or shared data set, this can be a great competitive advantage. I've learned a lot about drones and drone metadata. Metadata is the data that comes with the photos that the drone captures. The metadata in those photos contains a lot of information. Being able to access that information, understand that information, and use that information to produce results has been challenging, and I've learned a lot about how to do that. And that's led me down a rabbit hole that leads to all kinds of things that have to do with mapping and models of the earth and elevation. And it's been a really fun journey to learn all these things. Check out some of my other videos on the ellipsoid and the geoid to learn how I use those to accurately render a photo on top of a map. Sales. Sales is vital when you're forming a business. In fact, sales may be the first thing you need to focus on. Without a paying customer, really you don't have a business. Very early on, I did try to find some customers, and I did locate some paying customers very early on. But it wasn't until much later that I found a more ideal customer, which I think in this case is the government, specifically local governments like cities and counties, potentially even neighborhood associations. I followed numerous advice from books that I read, for instance, the MOM test, when learning about customers and learning to listen more than I talk. But when it came to making sales calls and trying to close a deal, I needed something more. And in that case, I found the Sandler method. And that's this book right here. It was covered in the Sandler Rules by David Mattson. I listened to the audio book on Audible. And that book was really instrumental in helping me understand the psychology of sales. Some of the techniques that I learned were things like a monkey paw, which is throwing out a smaller deal in the face of hesitation, something that is like a bite-sized, cookie-sized deal that is more easy to digest and gets the ball rolling. I also learned to aim for a no instead of aiming for a yes. By aiming for a no, you can find out very quickly why someone isn't going to buy your product. If someone really wants your product, if a government really wants your product, they're going to continue in the process and they're going to keep saying yes. But the worst thing you can get is a maybe. And a maybe is bad because maybe leaves you hanging. It doesn't let you move on. It doesn't let you move forward. It's got you stuck in the middle. A yes still requires some work. So when you get a yes, you still have to negotiate the terms of the deal. You have to negotiate the actual contract terms. Then you have to sign the contract. Then you have to commence the work and do the work and satisfy the work and receive the pay. And then you're done with that job. So, and on a no, you get it immediately. You find out why. You learn about why someone said no. And then you move on and you iterate with your product, or you look for other customers. So that was an interesting, non-intuitive thing I learned in the Sandler method, among other things. It's a very rich and detailed book with a lot of anecdotal advice about how to do sales. Okay, I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about the Sandler method. And the topic here is soft skills and listening more than I talk. I learned about this from the MOM test, but I guess I've heard this advice for a long time now. Listening was never my strong suit, although I might have thought it was. It was not something I had practiced. The MOM test teaches that In order to really empathize with your customer, you need to let go of your solution. You need to let go of your product and forget about it for a minute and just focus on a potential customer's problems, to dive deep into why they have those problems. And in doing so, you learn to really empathize with your customer and find the root cause or several root causes of different problems. And in knowing those root causes, you have a better chance of designing a product or solution that really fits their needs. Legal and administrative. This is another important thing I learned about business in general. Patents are actually important in ways that I never considered. Patents, for instance, can allow you to win a sole sourcing contract from the government. If you own a patent for a technology that the government wants, and you're the only person, or your company is the only company that is licensed to use that patent, you have a competitive advantage. You might avoid the long process of competition that comes with an RFP. Now, the government still has a duty to be fair and to try to get the best price, so they're going to do that the best they can. But it gives you a unique advantage. The other part of legal and admin that I did a lot of learning about was some stuff I learned from this book, The Visual MBA, and it's essentially learning about all the aspects of business. So it's a high-level look at everything from learning about your customer to pricing to hiring. I mean, anything you can imagine. Things like strategy, like are you entering a red ocean or a blue ocean? In this case, the Model T is entering a blue ocean because everyone else was producing luxury vehicles at the time. Credit, finance, corporate, governance, so much information in this book. And this is giving me a high-level view of why I need to do all of the administrative tasks, things like bookkeeping. I need to actually have a strategy for my business and a plan. Having this book has helped me to get a vision on that, because 5 years ago, a business plan to me meant that I just wrote like a one-page description of what I wanted to do. It didn't mean that I took into account specific strategies that are tried and tested, and this book has helped me realize that. The interesting thing about this corporate, legal, and administrative work is that it's not something that immediately pays off. This is long-term work. Things like patents, corporate filings, these pay off in the long run, and they're very important to do, but you don't get a lot of immediate satisfaction from having done them. It comes at tax time. It comes 2 years later when you're deducting expenses from the past 2 years, or it comes when you're getting a special contract or because you own a patent for a technology the government wants. The final area I've done a ton of learning on is around drones and regulations with drones. For instance, I had to get my pilot's license as a drone pilot with the FAA before I could start doing any commercial work. In addition, operations need to meet certain criteria. For instance, flying over people and over vehicles requires specific equipment, specific approvals. There are drones that are approved for these different scenarios, like BVLOS and operations over people. And using that drone equipment that is pre-approved by the FAA allows you to forego the waiver process. So it saves a lot of time by not having to file paperwork that's already been done by the company that manufactured the drone. The learnings around regulations have been extensive. I definitely early on didn't know nearly as much as I know now. I've spent hours and hours reading over the regulations in forums, discussing what they mean, and ultimately at this point I feel I have a very good understanding of the regulations. Additionally, I have a real respect for the reasons why the FAA has so many regulations. It's all about safety. It's all about protecting lives. The state of the art in drones is an ever-changing landscape. Since I started 2 years ago, drone technology has continuously improved. There are a number of new drone technologies that have come out, but also new processing techniques for processing the drone data. Ultimately, I've found a set of drones that really suit my needs. Incredibly sophisticated equipment. It's incredibly capable. The precision in the GPS is down to the centimeter, so I can get very precise locations and measurements. But also, the flight characteristics are quite good. These drones can fly in winds up to 30 miles per hour typically. They can fly anywhere from 45 minutes all the way up to 90 minutes and cover large areas. So that's been really interesting and exciting to learn about. And then finally, the thing I've learned the most about is processing drone data. Things like real-time kinematics, post-processing kinematics, understanding the geoid, which is a model of the gravitational pull of the Earth's different surfaces at different parts of the Earth, which affects the theoretical sea level at those locations on Earth. That's called the geoid. And then the ellipsoid, which is a sort of perfect ellipsoid shape that matches the ellipsoid shape of the Earth, roughly. The SRTM elevation map, which was produced by the space shuttle, aiming a radar at the Earth and then flying around the Earth and mapping out the Earth's surface. GPS itself and understanding how to manipulate photos in 3D space using rotation, altitude, and position in latitude and longitude. I've learned about processing photographs themselves using open source libraries like Sharp.js, OpenCV, doing math in JavaScript and Python to like matrix multiplication to map the 3D space and project a photo onto a surface, elevation adjusted surface of the Earth. So it's projecting it onto a model of the Earth. And just tons of learnings there. I've built all that stuff. I have working pipelines that give me very accurate results. That's been the bulk of my learning. All of that technical stuff that I've learned fits into a pipeline of process of putting it all together, and that includes a web app, that includes Lambda functions and queues and streams and databases and GraphQL and React and all of these technologies that I already knew something about, but I've really deepened my understanding of those web technologies, of those infrastructure technologies. And that's it, folks. That's a wrap for a shallow, broad look at all of the things that I've learned over the past 2 years. There's more, obviously there's more, but these are the things that really stand out to me and the things that I think I'm going to keep with me going forward. Maybe there will be other things that I bring up, but this is just, this is the main stuff.